Starting off in this location, you've got 3 of your nuts that holds the top of the strut to the load bearing member, which is this here. In the center, you've got a nut here that is used to attach your strut mount to your strut rod. To the left of that, you've got your supply pipe that takes washer fluid from the washer fluid tank via the washer fluid pump to your washer fluid jets. Now this component here is part of your system that prevents water from going into the engine compartment via the scuttle panel. Now this is your scuttle panel. This is one of your dampers that are used to hold up the bonnet. And this is one of your coolant chillers. Now this component here with other components are used to keep the coolant cool. Underneath the 2 pipes you've got your expansion valve for that chiller. You can also see your high voltage cable for your positive temperature coefficient heater and one of the many ground cables in the vehicle. Moving the camera to this location, you can see this component here. Now this component is your ABS modulator, master cylinder and brake booster all in one module. You also have the ECU that manages this module, your remote reservoir, several of your pipes that goes to your brake calipers, and other different components here. This pipe here leads to your brake fluid top-up station. Moving over to the right, you can see both of your high pressure and low pressure air conditioning pipes that feeds refrigerant to and from your evaporator for the cabin, your expansion valve for the cabin evaporator, your low pressure air conditioning recharge point dust cover, coolant pipes, other air conditioning lines, brake lines, and other different components are in this location. Moving over to this location, you can see your big wiring harness that takes high voltage direct current to and from your high voltage junction block. You can also see in this location part of your subframe, your steering rack, your integrated charging control unit, and other different wiring harnesses in this location. You can just see the high voltage junction block which I mentioned earlier to the right. One thing I forgot to mention is you've got sound deadening on the bulkhead that reduces the noise of the engine compartment or motor compartment from going into the cabin. Now this wiring harness is used to take the electrons from the integrated charging control unit to the high voltage junction block. The ICCU is not only used as an onboard charger, but it's also used as your DC to DC converter to charge up the 12 volt battery. Now on the offside front of the engine compartment, you can see that DC wiring harness which I mentioned earlier, but you can also see to the left of that your AC wiring harness that leads to your charge port. You also have in this location your other dust cover for your air conditioning recharge point, in this case the high pressure side, more coolant pipes, the high voltage wiring harness, one of your airbag crash sensors, and other different components. You can also see your cooling fan and its shroud. Moving to this location here, you've got your washer fluid cap, and below that you've got the neck that leads to your washer fluid tank. Now where it says RDP is one of your coolant pumps. Behind the pump you've got your reservoir tank for the whole coolant system. On top of the tank you've got your pressure cap. Moving the camera to this location, you can see the rubber that inside you've got your bonnet release cable. Now to the right of that you've got a wiring harness. You can actually see the bracket that holds the reservoir assembly. Below that you've got one of the motor mounts. In the center of the electric motor compartment you have your front boot. Now inside here you've got a piece of netting here to hold down stuff, and you've also got rubber. Now both of these rubbers you can remove. There's a little thing there to help you pull out the rubber part. Underneath there, you've got kind of a honeycomb liner to improve the strength of the lid. On the near side of the compartment, you've got a component here that you can remove so you can gain more access to the 12 volt battery. Now this is your 12 volt battery. On the 12 volt battery, you've got a cover that covers your negative post and terminal. You also have a grab handle to help you pull the battery out of the car. This component here is part of your system that holds the battery in the car. There is also information on the battery. Below the battery, you've got your battery tray. Now that big cable there is your ground cable, and you also have the other headlight. Moving over to the near side of the engine compartment, you've got this cover here. When you remove it, it reveals one of your power distribution centers. Inside here, you've got fusible links, fuses, relays, electrical connector, and that component there, if you pull it, it will disable the high voltage system. Moving the camera over here, you can see the rear of your radiator module, but you can also see your emergency release for your charge connector. You also have in this location more coolant pipes, the two DC cables for your electric cooling fan, your big wiring harness that contains your two DC cables for quick charging, and other different components here. Now in this location, you've got your electrical connector that is used to control and power that headlight, one of your airbag crash sensor wires, and other different components are back here as well. You can actually see a service cover which you can remove to gain access to that section of the headlight. Moving the camera rearwards, you can see your sensor to tell the operator that the brake fluid is running low. And also down in this location, you can see brake lines, your steering rack, anti-roll bar, and other different components like one of your steering rack boots. In this location here, you can see your differential housing, your drive shaft CV joint, this component here, and other different components are in this location. This is the bottom of the engine compartment in more detail. Now you can just see where that high voltage wiring harness goes is the very front of your high voltage battery. In the center, you've got your bonnet safety latch release lever. So in the center, you've got your cutout for the bonnet latch. You've also got safety information warning you about a cooling fan, which is located just underneath and behind the slam panel.